podcast. I am your host, per usual, Sean Tyson. I am here with Zoo and P. Bush. How you guys doing?
Doing great, man. Finally had a good Bears moment. That's all I gotta say. Solid Christmas gift. If the Bears could only do one thing, they came out with a clutch win on the road against Russell Wilson, man. So that's all I can ask for. Nick Foles coming in. Probably should have started after Andy Dalton went down, but just let Justin Fields learn. But what are you gonna say? Bears 5-10 now, man. 5-10. So working their way a little bit closer and closer. Probably going to end up getting 7 wins and getting a horrible draft spot, which, to Zoo, it's going to the Giants this year, baby. Typical Bears, man. They don't even have a first rounder. So I'll take any little positive moments I can out of those Bears, man.
Man, it's so sad. You thankful for that mediocre Bears team? I'm thankful for Aaron Rodgers and the show that this guy just keeps performing. MVP caliber, another MVP performance. Green Bay Packers, they're about to win the NFC. It's a beautiful thing to watch. And shout out to Aaron Rodgers for helping out my fantasy team again because virtuoso. That's all I got to say for Aaron Rodgers, man. All this guy is dropping virtuoso games. So thank you, Aaron Rodgers. Thank you for my Packers, and thank you for my fantasy team.
There you go.
Listen, Aaron Rodgers seems like he's taking a couple more steps in front of Brady in terms of being a solidified candidate for the MVP. So shout out to him, man. He's, looking back on his stats, just seeing that he's thrown for so many touchdowns and like with maybe 4 or 5 interceptions, just shows he's really good with reads, ball placement. It's pretty cool to see a guy. You say he's not as old as Brady, but he's pretty old in the later parts of his career playing like this. So hopefully, like you say, he can get through the playoffs and maybe get to the Super Bowl and cap his season off. So we're going to be looking out for that. But, we're going to kind of transition into Week 16. We're getting down to nitty gritty. A lot of key wild card races going out there. Especially in the NFC, it's a lot of tight teams. One thing I've been keeping an eye on so far. So I'm going to ask the guys, they can take in any direction. What was their thoughts from Week 16? And P. Bush, I'm going to go with you.
Man, oh man, I got to start with the Joe Burrow and the Bengals, man. That was I know it's the Ravens coming in extremely struggling in that secondary. They've dealt with injuries pretty much all year. We've definitely highlighted it multiple weeks with all the comebacks Lamar has had to lead this year. But look, man. Joe Burrow was getting a little bit of heat for, not necessarily playing to the level that he could be playing at, even though he's coming off a horrific injury in his first year. But, man, I'm most impressed with their wideouts, man. Their wideouts are ridiculous. They have 3 legitimate wide receivers, Tyler Boyd. You got Jamar Chase, and you got T. Higgins, who's putting up nearly 202 touchdowns, man. Absolutely ridiculous. If their offense can keep rolling, along with Joe Mixon getting, at least 100 yards from scrimmage a game, this team could be one you don't want to see in the playoffs. Not necessarily saying they'll make a Super Bowl run, but they could one-off a team in the first round, make things a little bit more interesting, and they can shoot out with anybody if they're on that day. So I'm interested to see where these Bengals go, and that win propelled them to possibly winning the AFC North this year.
Yeah, not only did it do that, but it propelled one of my teams to the fantasy football championship game. Shout out to Joe Burrow. Shout out to Joe Mixon. They put out a clinic, like 500 yards, 4 touchdowns. Joe Burrow owns the Ravens. He owns the Ravens. Something about the Ravens and that beautiful secondary, man. He just looks like a Hall of Fame quarterback when he plays against that team. It's pretty funny to watch because the Ravens beaten up by injuries, that secondary. Pretty embarrassing defense right now. Like, they're very beaten up. Like, you can't even blame them because of all the injuries and stuff. Like, it's hard to overcome. Like the quarterback situation, they were down a third-string quarterback. Third-string quarterback. Like, they don't even get Tyler Huntley.
Who's been playing pretty well.
Yeah, he's been pretty well. Like, Tyler Huntley, he put up 4 touchdowns the last performance. Like, they don't even get Tyler Huntley. Like, they got this Josh Johnson guy. Like he's pretty good. Like, he for a third-string quarterback?
Yeah.
There's a lot worse that you could do. But that defense is embarrassing. But I appreciate the bad defense because that allowed Joe Burrow and Joe Mixon to put up a performance that I've never seen before. Like, the amount of production those guys put up. Joe Mixon, all I got to ask you is, what took you so long, my man? You cost me 2 playoff games. Yeah. Joe Mixon, Mr. 5-point performance in the playoffs. About time you showed up. But for me, oh me, man. My God, I got to talk about the Packers-Browns game. Like, the Packers-Browns game, like, my God, the Green Bay Packers and the Browns, Baker Mayfield. I'm sorry, man. Every time I watch
might be.
I don't think he's coming back. I don't think he's coming back. Like Nick Chubb's, like every time they threw the football, I'm like, oh, what are you doing? Like, give the ball to Nick Chubbs. Every time Nick Chubbs gets the ball, I see 6-7 yards, man, of offense. Every single time. Even the back of Dearness Johnson, that dude's balling too. So I'm just like, man, every time I see Baker throw the ball and some of those picks,
horrible.
As a Cleveland fan, I don't know how you pay this man. I can see why they were hesitant to pay this man.
You don't.
I don't know how this guy got so many commercials because he is the definition of a mediocre quarterback. Like him and Jimmy Garoppolo, they are both very mediocre quarterbacks right now. And then the same boat, and you cannot win with Baker Mayfield as a guy leading your team. Like you win in spite of Baker Mayfield. So what they did against the Packers, which was, man, they actually made it a game. Like it should not have been a game. The Packers are the supreme team. They were a dominant entire time. But then, I don't know, they got a little lackadaisical, a couple of 3 and outs, which is not very Aaron Rodgers-esque. They almost came back and, like, they got out of field goal range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Picked off.
Yeah, man. Baker Mayfield just became Baker Mayfield, man. Like, they almost beat the Green Bay Packers in spite of him throwing 4 picks. 4 picks.
Think so, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just like, man, this team is pretty good, but Baker Mayfield is such an anchor on this roster. Like, I'm just like, it's only so much that Nick Chubb can do on 17 carries. Like, like the Browns, man, I like them, man. I like the rushing team, but man, it is hard to overcome Baker Mayfield, man. And
Browns will be the Browns, man.
He's losing a lot of money, man. He's losing a lot of money this year.
And he's only put himself in that situation. Let's be completely honest here. I mean, not that he has the greatest weapons on the outside, but, you know, with Odell leaving, obviously, and that really wasn't working out there, whether or not Baker was there or not, I still don't know if it would have panned out that well for Odell. But yeah, man, Browns definitely on the downward trend. Ravens similarly. I think they'll really need Lamar, if anything, to come back and just give him a miracle 2 games. I think they have a solid matchup against the Bengals again. Not sure if they do play one more time. It could be the Chiefs. But the Ravens have a tough schedule. Steelers aren't looking the hottest. The Bengals are looking like they might win the AFC North, and I don't think a lot of people would have predicted that at the beginning of the season, especially with the Ravens, man. Especially with the Ravens in that division, who just their season, man, they got screwed with J.K. Dobbins going down right away, preseason, and then you got all these secondary issues, man. Yeah. Very sad to see with a team that I think a lot of people had. Zoo, you were I don't know if you were that high on the Ravens this year, but I think we all had them at least winning that division.
Oh yeah, I had them definitely winning the division. Yeah, well, like the amount of injuries that happened, I just feel like it's very unlucky, and the Bengals are capitalizing off it. And they finally found a franchise quarterback because without Joe Burrows, team is the Jets. That's what they are. Like they were just a irrelevant franchise, just not good at all. But they got blessed with Joe Burrows and this guy. When you watch him play, this is a franchise quarterback. Yeah, like this is what the Jacksonville Jaguars wanted in Trevor Lawrence, trying to turn around their franchise. Taking a couple of years because they got Urban Myers, and that slowed down the process. But that is what they wanted. That's the prototype of changing a franchise with a QB. Yep. And Joe Burrows, what he's done in like 2 years, my God,
not even
incredible, man, incredible.
Yeah, I wasn't really big on Joe. Like when they came out with him and Tua, I was kind of just more on Tua because I thought Tua had more of an escapability factor. But then when I saw Joe Burrow, like in his first season before he got injured, I saw he's like, he's a little bit of an athlete. He's not like a statue back there. Mm-hmm. Plus, too, Joe Burrow just carries himself. You guys keep talking about franchise quarterback. He just carries himself that way. Like he carries himself as like, okay, I know this is the Bengals, but that doesn't mean we can't win and be relevant now. Yeah. And I think, with him being able to get Chase and Higgins and Boyd and just all the weapons that he has at his disposal, I know a lot of people are probably not going to be like, hey, Zach Taylor is coach of the year or whatever, but he's done a really good job with him, I guess, making him a quarterback that is allowed to make mistakes and go for deep balls and things like that. And, it's going to be interesting in that division just looking out. Nobody thinks Lamar, he's been hurt. So nobody thinks like, oh, they need to change. So I think Lamar and the Ravens are fine. We're going to see what Pittsburgh does, who they get. And, Cleveland is, it would be a disservice if they didn't move on. Like, they could probably use an excuse like, well, this quarterback draft is not good and we don't know who we're going to get in free agency. That's fine. They may bring him back for another year, but it's the writing's on the wall. We know Baker is not it. With him being the number 1 pick too, you just can't look that bad. You just can't. So there might be a change coming in there. Like this could be a situation with Cincinnati for a couple of years now. If Joe Burrow keeps progressing, that could be the division for a while. Because like you say, when they played the Ravens, now they have been injured, but when they played the Ravens, they beat the Ravens down. Like it hadn't been like, nip tuck games like how division games are. No, they beat the Ravens down. So that's kind of a statement saying, nah, I'm here now. And it's just, like I said, with Burrow, it's really impressive him coming off an injury too. Like who knows what he would have been if he would have stayed healthy last year, maybe been able to progress even more. Like he's a dude. So yeah, you would hope with Trevor, they get that same maturation. I'm not as confident with that because the Jaguars, I know the Bengals have been bad for her, but they at least have had some type of stability with, some playoff games and things like that. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see who becomes that next guy. I saw a quote I put on there. I think I put it on my IG page. It was, who would you take, Burrow or Herbert? I used to be so much in Herbert's corner, but now it's starting to make me rethink it. Because Burrow, like you say, everybody's got weapons because Herbert's got his own set of weapons too. Mm-hmm. So Burrow's just a gamer, man. He doesn't back down, and it's going to be interesting to see who kind of takes that next step as the AFC quarterback. So, but for me, I had a couple of chips on the table. I was thinking about pushing them all in, but man, if the Eagles get in the playoffs, I just like their attack, man. I like how they're able to run with Jalen. Now, it sucks that Miles Sanders broke his hand. Yeah. So it's kind of like, that kind of took the sails out of it. But I just like how their offense now, more so than what it was before, they're running more. They're doing more with Jalen running the ball. They're doing more with their backs. They got they got Gainwell now, even though Miles Sanders hurt. Gainwell, Boston Scott, I think Jordan Howard. They got some backs back there, and they're playing more into what Jalen Hurts' his skill set is. And I kind of link it to what they did in Baltimore with Lamar. Besides, like, we're just going to throw 1,000 times. No, we're going to do a quarterback. We have a quarterback that skill set is running the ball. We're going to do that and make easy passes for him. And then when I saw them in that last game that they played, Jalen looked good. So it's like I just feel like they could be a team in the NFC. Right now I think they're 8 or 7. So it's like I don't know who they end up being matched up with, but I'm starting to feel them because I'm not sold on San Francisco because of their quarterback. I'm just not sold on them. And now they're saying Jimmy G had, injuries, whatever. And if they bring in Trey Lance, it's not. Trey Lance, I like him a lot, but I don't think he'd be able to take them on a playoff run. So I'm just looking at a dark horse in the NFC. I kind of like the Eagles, man. I just like how Jalen looks. I think he's like smaller or like a bigger running back that's playing quarterback. That's not a knock. He just can make decent throws, and Devontae's a really good guy he can get to. And Rieger, who I've been killing all year, made a couple of plays.
He had a nice,
So I was like, all right, if he could show up every once in a while, maybe this is a team that could make it at least a upset win. So I don't know.
They're kind of trending upwards. Ever since Hurts got injured and Minshew had to come in and play that game, I feel like it lit a fire under Hurts. Thanks. Like, my backup is a bit competent, so I better start playing better. And he's actually been throwing the ball well. I think he threw 2 touchdown passes this past week. Yeah. One to Devontae. But yeah, man, it's kind of, for me, the opposite. And you were just talking about him, Sean, was the Chargers, man. That loss against the Texans.
I don't know what that was.
Yeah, that was probably the second biggest upset after the Jags over the Bills this year, probably. But look, man, I know they were without Eckler, but you can't really even blame that because Justin Jackson put up 130 yards and a couple touchdowns. So obviously that line is there for sure. I think that they're just a little too inconsistent as a team. So, they're 8-7. That loss pretty much, I think it took them out of the playoffs. They might be the next spot out of that 7th wild card spot. But with the Bills trending upwards, the Patriots, we'll see if they still hang around. Bengals winning. The Chargers have to win this week with the Raiders also kind of lurking, and obviously the Chiefs pulling away in the division. So that, for me, that's the team that I think is on the hot seat the most at this moment, just because they had high expectations. They do get Eckler back this week. He's off COVID protocol. But like we said, not like Justin Jackson is incompetent as a backup running back. So it's clearly not the problem. Herbert just made a lot of mistakes. And their defense, they really need to learn. And once again, you can't allow Rex Burkhead to run for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns on you, man.
Yeah.
He hasn't seen a game like that even when he played with Tom Brady. What the hell, man? So that's a team I definitely am going to be watching over the next 2 weeks because I think they have to win out if they really want to solidify and they're kind of vying there with the Dolphins for that final spot.
Let me ask
AFC
you
playoffs.
one quick question. Who, in terms of making the playoffs, who would you have more faith in to maybe because I don't know who the seeding is. Who do you have more faith in now? Would you say the Chargers or the Dolphins to get in the playoffs?
I mean, I think for me, I'd probably have to go with the Chargers just because I think they have more significant wins, right? Dolphins are extremely hot and they have a really good defense.
Yeah,
obviously, the Saints. Once again, a horrible
quarterback. Quarterback.
I don't know what up.
Ian Book.
I don't know what's up with the NFL, man, but their scheduling of primetime games this year has been way off, and I don't know why. I mean, you remember probably a couple years ago, and maybe it's just ingrained in my mind because it's the last positive Bears moment I've had in a couple of years. But when the Bears were good that one year and they went 12-4, they actually flexed games that were not solid primetimes to put in the teams that were actually kind of out of nowhere. And I'm surprised they didn't do that. Maybe it was with COVID and all that. But to your point, Sean, I mean, the Dolphins have to play the Titans and the Patriots. Those are their last two games. That's not a cakewalk whatsoever.
Not easy
definitely would be tough for them to win out and go 9-0. And the Chargers have two divisional games, one against the Broncos and the other against the Raiders. So it's kind of a toss-up there. Really just depends who gets hot and if Herbert is able to play to the level that we know he can play to. So we'll see, man. But I would put a little bit more stake on the Chargers than the Dolphins.
Yeah, I just saw the Dolphins last night really watch their game, and their defense is really, really good.
Yeah.
So that's why. And Tua's doing the 200 yards, touchdown, whatever. And I'm going to protect the ball. Even though I think he had a fumble, but I don't know. It's just interesting to see. I've just been more locked in on the NFC and looking at those teams and seeing who's going to actually make the playoffs because it just seems a little bit more interesting. But like I said, we're going to keep an eye on that. We're getting down to nitty gritty. A couple more weeks and the playoffs will start. So you guys stay tuned for that. Right now, we're going to switch into college football. I know we don't talk a lot about that on the show, but the playoffs are coming up. You got Georgia, Bama, Cincinnati. And I'm blanking on the last name. What did I say? In Michigan. Sorry to do that. I know you guys just beat Ohio State. I want to do it to you guys. But it's just, a couple matchups. So I wanted to ask the guys, they can give me the winners of those two games, who they maybe got a national championship, things of that nature. And Pete, I'm gonna start with you again, man.
Oof, man, this is tough. I mean, I'm not a college football expert, so take myself with a grain of salt. But I think looking at the Alabama-Cincy game, I mean, I know Cincinnati, their offense has been pretty electric this year. I mean, and then you look over on Bama and you got Bryce Young, Jameson Williams combo, which absolutely just shredded Georgia. I mean, I think, Jameson put up around 190, I want to say, and a couple touchdowns against the best defense in the country. So, you're talking about a guy that can pretty much get wherever he wants to be. And to Sean's bringing up Ohio State there real quick, he didn't even make the starting roster on Ohio State as a wide receiver. And now he's the number one wide receiver in this upcoming draft. He's pretty much the projected number one wideout. So he made the right call transferring, going from Ohio State to Bama. I don't think you can complain about that even for 1 second. So, Desmond Ridder, right? I think that's the Cincinnati quarterback. I mean, he'd have to probably play a perfect game if they even really wanted to stay in it. And they'll need to rely on Jerome, out of the backfield, putting up, I think he put up, once again, similarly, about 190 and 2 touchdowns against Houston in their championship game. So I do have Bama winning that one. But I do think Desmond Ridder will keep them around. I got him winning by 10. So I'm not sure what the spread is, but I could see Cincinnati. I could see Cincinnati covering. It'll just depend if they can even get, if you can get 2 or 3 stops against Alabama and, make them just kick a field goal or even stop them, you have even a slight chance. That's all you can ask for.
It's all about the QB.
Yeah, the Cinderella stories, man. I keep that fairy tale, man. Cinderella stories don't win fantasy or college football playoffs, man. Alabama beating Cincinnati, man. Cute story, Cincinnati. Man, I didn't even know Cincinnati was good at football. Like fantasy football or college football playoffs? Football playoffs, top 4 teams getting selected, undefeated. That's impressive, but that fairy tale ending, man, coming to an end, man. I know Nick Saban. I know Alabama football. All they do is make the playoffs and make it to the finals. So easy pick, man. Alabama making it. Georgia, they're making it too, man. But Alabama going to take it home again, man. Because there's something about certain franchises, man. Winners keep on winning. And and I just bet on the winners, man. I don't bet on the underdogs. You just bet on the favorites, baby. Let it ride, especially in college football. Yeah, especially in college football, which is dominated just by certain franchises. Like Harbaugh, he had a cute season. Like I remember Harbaugh was going to get fired, man, for being such a bum, right?
He took less money.
Yeah, all the guy was like, oh, it can't be Ohio State. Finally, he has a breakthrough year. It's over. Good for you, Harbaugh. Made it to the playoffs. You ain't getting fired, but it's over. It's over. And so Georgia's been dominant for the last couple of years of college football. So I got them in, but Alabama gonna take it home, baby.
Yeah, and they already beat him in the SEC champ game too.
Yeah,
so
it was a blowout.
Experience, but in the Georgia, I actually have Michigan going, man. I think they have two of the better defenses. Obviously, Georgia known for their defense pretty much this year. I do have Michigan beating them by 3 in this game. Michigan is, I think they're +7 in this game.
Yeah, +7.
And they're, I believe, I don't know exactly how many games they've played. I want to say maybe 12 or 13, and they've beaten the spread and covered in 11 of those games. So, I mean, if you're a betting guy and, maybe you don't think, Michigan's going to win it, but, maybe they could, lose on a field goal or something like that. But I personally don't, and once again, I don't watch too much college football, but I've watched enough of Stetson Bennett. He makes a lot of mistakes, man. Like he likes to.
Well, he's a former walk-on, so
he's a former walk-on. I mean, he's got Brock Bowers, man, who's an absolute stud. Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but he'll probably be the number 1 tight end. In the country, he's a true freshman right now.
Yeah,
true freshman. So he can't enter the draft, but he's got high hopes. For next year's draft. So he's probably going to have a big game. But Bennett's bound to make some mistakes, and I just think Michigan doesn't make as many mistakes, and they have a pretty good running game. So it's really just going to come down to which quarterback you trust, because I do think it'll be tough to run against either one of these fronts with. And I don't know the names off the top of my head, Sean, but I think they each have a respective Heisman or had a respective Heisman candidate on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah. So that's obviously not one defender can make that much difference in a game, but if they can really shut down the running game on both sides, which quarterback do you trust more? And I just can't go with Stetson Bennett, man. I got to go with Cade McNamara. So Michigan by 3, man. And then I got Bama beating them per usual in the national championship game. So either way, we know the outcome.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to with a lot of these games, especially when it comes to bowl games and like the playoffs, it's always quarterbacks. It's kind of maybe similar to NFL. Like there's so many moving parts, but as long as you have a solid quarterback, I always go back to Zoo's example of how Jordan Love looked so bad, even though he had Devontae Adams. It's like quarterback is really important. And Desmond Ridder, he's not Deshaun Watson level in terms of athlete and player. But I always feel like when you have a quarterback, you have a chance. So like your point to where, hey, the spread is 13.5, it's a pretty good chance they could cover that. Now, I'm not going to pick them because Clemson is more of a bigger brand and a bigger program in terms of how they recruit and how they play. So even though when they were playing Bama and Deshaun was the quarterback, it wasn't crazy to see Deshaun go off in both of the games he played against Bama because he had talent that was actually pretty good that people knew about but maybe didn't know to an extent. And plus he was a baller. So when you combine all that, quarterback can really fix anything. And it goes to the same thing when Bryce Young went against Georgia. Like everybody was picking Georgia because their defense was so dominant. Well, it's like it doesn't matter if the guy that's pulling the trigger and throwing the football knows where he's going and has athletes get the ball. Like how the game is set up, no defense can be truly dominant if you have a really good quarterback. Yep. So giving respect to Desmond Ridder, I'm going to say that they can cover, but I see Bama, getting on top of them pretty early because, what's kind of scary about Bama is even though they're number 1, they've been kind of playing the disrespect card because everybody was picking Georgia and they had lost to Texas A&M and everyone's like, oh, Bama's not Bama. And then they came in and smacked Georgia around. So now I feel like I just saw a quote the other day. I think their number 1 DN, Will Anderson, who's like could have been a Heisman contender. He had a quote saying, yeah, everybody's disrespecting us. Nobody thinks we could beat Cincinnati. And I'm like, come on. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
nobody thinks you can beat Cincinnati. But I'm telling you, that's what Nick Saban's telling his guys right now.
Yeah, hype them up.
Yeah, he's like, man, them guys picked Georgia against you, yada, yada, yada. So he's got them in a frame where if they get on top of Cincinnati early, it could get ugly. Now, with Georgia and Michigan, their backup quarterback, you guys probably don't know, but JT Daniels was like a guy that came from USC that was supposed to be the starter, but then he got hurt. And Stetson Bennett kind of played, and he just kind of took the job. And because he's been a solid starter, he hasn't really been benched. A lot of people were hoping he was going to switch to JT, but then JT ended up getting, I think, put in COVID protocol. So I don't know if he's going to be able to test out in time Friday. But that was going to be a big factor in if Georgia was going to actually go to him. So I don't know if they have to stick with Stetson. It's going to be a coin toss because both of the teams are elite defenses. Their quarterbacks, I don't even know who the quarterback is for Michigan. Maybe
McNamara. He's all right. He doesn't make
he's
too
okay.
many.
I watched the game. I watched the game against Michigan State when they ended up losing before like Michigan State came back. McNamara looked okay, made some pretty decent throws, but he's kind of like a step above Stetson, but he's not this huge guy who's going to take over a game. So, I would side with Georgia just because if it's a defensive game and they're running a ball, I just have a little bit more faith with Stetson, maybe being able to take advantage of a couple of receivers, even though he's no, guy that's going to be a first-round draft pick or something like that in the NFL. But I would probably take him. And then if it's an Alabama-Georgia rematch, you know how they always say it's like it's hard to beat a team 3 times, but Bama's only playing them twice. So I probably would pick Bama just because Bryce Young is the Heisman winner. Yeah. He can move around. Like, don't kill me because I feel kind of vindicated because I heard a guy on ESPN. I want to say, I don't know who it is, one of the personalities. But he doesn't have the same stature. But if you guys really look at Bryce Young, he has some Aaron Rodgers to him, how he throws it. He's not as good. He's not as good. I'm not saying that.
Mechanics-wise.
But mechanics-wise, he throws like that whole, like, throwing that foot thing, like he kind of flicks it.
He flicks his elbow. A little bit in hhim.
The only thing is he's smaller than Aaron Rodgers, but he kind of has the same mechanics. Now, I don't think he's going to be as good. But, man, it's weird. It's kind of eerie how he throws it. And I think that's why Nick – because he's a California kid. Like, Nick he'll go after quarterbacks everywhere, but he won't usually go. I mean, the farthest he'll probably go is maybe Texas. He went all the way to California to go get this kid, even though he was the number 1 player. But still, it's like crazy. He went that far to go get a quarterback, so he kind of saw something in him too. I mean, I think he was actually, in college they have personal recruitments, like your QB coach maybe recruits you more. But I think Nick took that one on as a personal recruitment for him, and he rarely does that. So that means he might have the goods. So it got backed up this year. So I'm very high, man. Like I said, everybody's a quarterback guy. I'm going with Bama. Could I see Cincinnati in the second quarter, be down 3 points? And it's like, oh, well, it's like 6 minutes in the second till halftime, and Cincinnati's only down 6 points. It's like, oh, that could happen. But I always feel like
meat grinder then.
Yeah. But once you get, that's what happens when you have the bigger teams. When they have depth and it gets to the third and fourth quarter, it's lights out because then when you're, second string or third string defensive tackles coming on the field, Alabama's second and third string is a guy that's a 5-star that is just waiting to play, and he's getting after it. So that's kind of what happens with those types of teams. But it's going to be interesting. Like I said, I love the college football playoffs. As I've gotten older, I've kind of, been more trending towards NFL, but, I still have a, small place in my heart for college football. So it's going to be cool to see these teams compete, and hopefully, the bowl games have been kind of getting racked with COVID issues. Hopefully the games are able to still go on. It's safe to say I think they will because of the money involved. Nobody cares if the Alamo Bowl in Texas gets canceled. The playoff games, I don't think those are getting canceled anytime soon. So it's going to be interesting to watch those games and see how they fold out. But yeah, I'm probably going with Bama. Bama's probably going to be my winner.
Yeah.
So
I feel like it's just the nation's pick, man, even though we all hate it.
You
want to see somebody new, but that's the whole point, man. When you have a good program, you get the best talent, and best talent wins games. So
that's how it is in college, man. Like, I get the people who are NFL guys and who really don't care for college because it is kind of if you win and you have a plan, there's no parity. Like, you're kind of just going to be there unless, maybe another team in your conference has as much money as you do and enough reach. It's not as much in the NFL. Like you say, you don't really ever see what Houston did to the Chargers. You don't see that in college.
No.
Like, that's
very rarely.
And if it does, they usually beat them by like 3 or 5 or 6 or whatever. It's not a blowout like an FCS team beating like an Alabama. That would, if it did happen, it would be off since people got injured. So I get it, but like you say, college football is a big staple in the country. So just wanted to talk about that, and hopefully we get some good games. So going to be looking out for that. Make sure you guys follow us on bullheaded_pod on Instagram. I know it's the holidays. I know everybody's off from work, things like that. I'm still going to be constantly putting out content. Like I say, NBA season is still kicking around. Teams are still playing. next month will be January. Next thing you know, it's the trade deadline, All-Star. So it's going to be a lot of things coming up with the NBA that you guys got to tune into. It'll be the playoffs for NFL. Pretty sure by the time we may record, it'll probably be the championship game. So we may touch in that with college football, but we'll see about that. But as always, from me, Zoo and Peepers,